Hi folks, and welcome to this higher geography revision video in preparation for your FAB, which is coming up. So just to let you know, this video will first of all go over the important information and the details about your FAB. There will then be some revision sessions on our lithosphere topic, our population topic, and on our map skills question, and then there'll be some links for extra help. So first of all, the important information about your FAB when it comes up: you will sit one paper. It will be 90 minutes and it will cover the following topics. So we will have our two physical topics, first of all, lithosphere and biosphere, then our human topic of population, and then global issue will be climate change, and you'll see it's out of 20 marks, and the mapping skills will be out of 20 marks as well. These are the two biggest ones. It replicates the final exam for our global issues and our mapping skills. The others will be a mixture of 8, 10 marks. Lithosphere revision and key points in particular. So first of all, here are the possible questions which could come up. So we have to explain the formation of our erosional glaciated features, and there are quite a significant list of these. Then we've got the same, but our depositional glaciated features, and there's 3 of these possible that could come up. Then we've got the formation of our erosional coastal features, and the list is there. And then we've got our formation of our depositional coastal features. Now, on top of this, you also have your conflicts and the management strategies for conflicts, but I'm not going to focus on them on this video. I'm going to focus on these formation questions because it seems like a lot, and it seems like there are so many different features that you need to learn, but I'm hopefully going to go through and reiterate some of the ways that we can make these more manageable, and we can still achieve the marks and not worry about the kind of volume of features. So if we take first of all our glacial erosional features, so our corries, arêtes, pyramidal peaks, U-shaped valleys, and so on. They are worth 10 marks. It seems like a lot. However, for any feature, no matter what the feature is, you can actually get 9 marks before mentioning the feature. So here is how. Hopefully we remember this, but it's a good bit of revision. So first of all, you've got your 2 marks for your formation of the glacier. So glaciers form in north-facing hollows where more snow falls in winter than melts in summer. 2 marks. Further 3rd mark for the glacier then moves downhill under gravity. Then you have 6 marks available for your erosional processes. So your plucking, abrasion, and freeze-thaw. If you can explain these out in a little bit of detail, you'll then get your 6 marks, and there are potentially 9 out of 10 before you even need to mention the feature. So then your final mark only really needs to be the correct ending for the feature. 1 mark, 1 little sentence, but also it's worth noting that there's also 1 mark available for a named example. So what I always advise to people is don't necessarily freak out too much or worry too much about the volume. Focus on your 9 marks for your formation of your glacier and your erosional processes, and then 1 sentence or 1 named example of each if that's manageable. If not, you get the 9 out of the 10 and you don't worry too much about what the feature actually is. Hopefully that helps. Our glaciational depositional features are a little bit trickier, and they probably are the most tricky ones, but as a wee bonus, they don't always come up quite so often, and they're worth a lot less, so they're only worth 6 marks. You do, however, get a couple of marks on the melting of glaciers. So if you can talk about, and I've given a wee sentence there in case you've not got it in your notes, on reaching lower altitudes or when temperatures rise, that would give you a mark. The glacier melts, losing power and depositing moraine. So that's a good way to get a couple of marks, again, no matter which feature comes up, because it could be the drumlin, it could be the esker, or it could be the terminal moraine. What you then do have is you have some similarities between your terminal moraine and your drumlin, which are actually the opposite to the esker. So this might help you a little bit. So the terminal moraine and the drumlin are dumped directly from the melting glacier. They're unsorted as boulder clay, whereas the esker is the one that's deposited by the meltwater streams. Because it's deposited by the meltwater streams, it's sorted materials. The water sorts it, and it's fine sands and gravels because that's all the water, all the energy the water has to carry. So hopefully that helps a little bit. And what I would also note there as well is that there's always been a choice in the past when they've come up. So it's either been the terminal moraine or the drumlin, or the terminal moraine or the esker. And actually 1 year there was a diagram and you've got to pick one of all 3. So hopefully that maybe helps a little bit and you might not bog you down on too much. But even if you were to just think about the 2 marks for the melting of the glaciers, that would give you a couple of marks out of 6 if it's something that you find maybe a little bit more challenging. Okay, now on to our coastal erosional features. There aren't as many of these as there are with your glaciated ones. So there's your headlands and bays, your caves, arches and stacks, your cliffs and wave cut platforms. Still is 10 marks. Now unfortunately there's not the same 9 marks with glaciation, but you still do get 6 marks for your 3 erosional processes. So if we do our hydraulic action, our corrosion and our solution, that should hopefully help. And then obviously you will need more detail for each of the different features, but again, there's still 1 mark available for your named example. So that's a really, really, really good way. And even if you were worried about the feature or the feature that you wanted didn't come up, or it totally kind of panicked you, 6 marks for your erosional processes, 1 mark for a named example. So there's 7 out of 10. So you're hitting that 70% for that mark there. Diagrams can be good as well, although I've not mentioned them before. You can pick up some marks for any labels that are on a diagram that are not written in any written parts that you would have. And then finally, the formation of your coastal depositional features, not so tricky like the glaciated ones. And again, you've got this good introductory paragraph where you get 4 marks for longshore drift. So longshore drift is the zigzag movement of material along a beach. And if you mention the swash, you mention the backwash, these are going to give you extra marks as well. And then again, you would need the correct ending of the feature. And actually, these are really quite nice because actually you need the sand spit. Coastline changes direction, material continues to be deposited out into open ocean until it builds up. You need the sand spit to then get the sandbar to then get the tombolo. So these actually are really quite nice features. But again, if lithosphere isn't one for you, here's your 4 marks for longshore drift, and a renamed example gives you 5 out of 8. Hi folks, this section is some revision on population. So firstly, the possible questions that can come up for our population topics. So firstly is discuss the different methods countries use to collect population data. Secondly, explain why it may be difficult to gather accurate population data in developing countries. 3 is your population pyramids, so discuss the possible consequences of these, and there are 2 different styles that can come up, so we'll go through both. And that's your economically less developed and economically more developed country. And then finally, you've got your migration. So referring to a migration flow you've studied, explain the reasons for this migration. So that's your push-pull factors. And then again, for a named migration flow you have studied, discuss the impacts on either the donor or receiving country. And we'll go over that as well. So firstly, your methods of data gathering. Now, there are 4 key things that you want to mention. I say 4, it might actually be 5. Yes, it's 5. So the first one is your census. Now, you're only going to get a maximum of 2 marks for census. So it's good, but don't go on and on and on about the census. So for example, you will get a mark if you talk about how a census is a gathering of data on a country's population, which is carried out every 10 years. As long as you've got the fact that it's gathering something in every 10 years, that'll give you a mark. And then you can get a further mark if you talk about some examples of what it gathers. So for example, it might gather data on population numbers, education, healthcare, and it's a snapshot over a week. The second one are your civil registrations. Now, in order to get the mark here, you need to say civil registrations, which include birth and deaths. So you need to talk about the registrations of births and deaths and how this is good because it's a continuous count of the population. And that's actually better than a census because it's continual. The second one is border control. So again, here you need to mention visa applications, which allows the country to see people who are moving into the country and also moving out. So again, it's keeping a continual look on that. Next, we have our Scottish Household Survey. So this is done continuously, and I think that's a key thing. It's like a mini census, but it's done continually to a random sample of the population. And they like the words continually because, again, it shows that it's better than a census, but they also like the fact that people are chosen at random when they're selected to do this. And then finally, you've got your NHS records who can, keep up-to-date information on healthcare and any health needs and things like that. So it's generally a 6 marker. So I always say to people, a couple of marks for your census and then a wee mark from each of the other ones that you've got there. Now, problems with taking a census. One of the key things here is it's generally quite a large question, so it's like 10, 12 marks, but you will generally get 2 marks for named examples. So you can see here, I've just sort of summarised the things that you want to talk about, but then I've put the named examples in to show you as well. So I would at least learn 2 of these. Doing 3 would be even better, just in case for some reason there's a third named example mark. So obviously they're all here, so you'd want to talk about how some people are nomadic, so they move around, so they might either not get counted or they might be counted twice. That's really important that you say that they're not counted or they might be counted twice. They want you to think of the kind of practicalities of giving it out and filling it in. And obviously Mali's the example there. Literacy rates, in some countries they cannot read and write, so if they get a form they're just physically not able to fill it in, so that's the kind of thing they're looking for. And again, South Africa's your example there. Size and access are quite similar, so I always encourage people to just do one or the other. And the tricky thing about size is a lot of people will say when a country's really large it takes a lot of time and costs a lot of money to give the census. And very often people give Russia as an example, but we're technically looking for economically less developed countries. So I always encourage people to look at countries which are difficult to access, so mountainous countries like Nepal that I've put there, or you might talk about a country with large areas of desert or something like that, and how it's difficult to cross these countries, and it might be difficult in the actual delivering of the census. Conflict, Afghanistan is your best example. Again, I think a few people have been tempted to maybe talk about more recent conflicts, and maybe pulling in Ukraine, but it's not an economically less developed country, so you won't get the named example mark for that. And again, for this one, you want to be specific about things like, it's too dangerous for enumerators to deliver the census, or the data goes out quickly because of the high death rates, or it's not representative because there's a lot more men and the women and children have maybe moved somewhere temporarily as refugees. Truth telling is there as well. Some people might be scared, they don't know why the government wants the data, so they might not actually tell the truth, so it's not valid. And obviously I've put China as an example there. There's one that I've actually not put on this list, which is multiple languages. So you get some countries where it costs a lot of money because they have to put it in many different languages and they can't do that. And I think actually when I was going through that list, I missed Ethiopia there. Some countries just cannot afford the census because it's just too expensive to be able to first of all deliver it and then to process it all and get some results from it. So there's a lot of information from that one, which is good. And again, remember your named examples for that. Population pyramids. Now the key thing is when this question comes up, or if this question comes up, you're only going to get one population pyramid. Now it should be quite straightforward, but you need to make sure you're recognising the correct one. So the first one I've got here is Uganda on the left hand side, so that's your economically less developed country, and the challenges with that country is that you have a rapidly growing population, in particular because of this high birth rate and because the death rate is falling in the country, so people are living longer as well. The second one on the right is obviously for ourselves, for the United Kingdom, but recognising the shape, the biggest challenge that they're going to have in the future is this ageing population, with our life expectancy increasing and many, many, many people living beyond the ages of 65, and in particular into the sort of 85 to 90 bracket there. So if we take one at a time, there's a lot of information on these. I'm probably not going to read through all of them in detail, but for your less economically developed country, you want to think about, maternity hospitals, immunisation programmes. There'll need to be money put into all these sorts of things. They might need to build more schools, train more teachers. All of these things will cost the government money. The government might put in policies to try and promote smaller families because they realise the struggles that's going to happen. So you might get policies like, for example, China's one-child policy or something similar. Kerala in India's got really good examples of how they're trying to control population sizes there. Housing's an issue. In many developing countries, it's already overcrowded, and that's just going to get worse. A lot of more people will be forced to live in shanty towns, so therefore obviously there's the challenges that come with living there. A bonus though, however, because although we talk about consequences, there can be good things. There's a much larger potential workforce as these babies and children grow older, so that may attract multinational companies to the country. However, a kind of downside to more workforce is because there's more of them, there might actually be high levels of unemployment or people being underemployed. So doing a job that they're not like doesn't match their skill set, so they are overskilled for the job that they do. So that's important if you recognise that population pyramid, that is the rapidly growing we talk about. The second one is obviously like a country like ourselves, a more economically developed country where you have the life expectancy, which is increasing, and we have this ageing population. So it's more of this barrel shape. Now, sorry, these don't seem to fly in. Key thing is pensions to start off with. Okay, so that's going to cost the government more to pay people's pensions, and actual current workers, so working age people and working age people in the future, will actually have to pay more towards tax contributions in order to fill these pension money pot that's needed. Because of that, a lot of people living in the country will be encouraged to invest in private healthcare or private pensions, because they know that the government might struggle and they might not get as much as they possibly could or would want or would need to live on. Certainly to live the lifestyle we're kind of used to. Obviously, there's going to be increased strain on the health service. Things like hip replacements, heart medication, these will all give you good marks. Retirement age might need to be increased, and it has actually already happened in a lot of countries, ourselves included. As well as health service, other services, so care homes, meals on wheels, these kind of things. Also more demands on adult children to look after the elderly parents, parents that are living for a lot longer. We might also need to encourage migration into the country, so in migration, in order to fill some job vacancies and to try and help meet the needs of everybody. And actually the birth rate, falling might actually lead to a decrease in the demand for a lot of our young children services, such as schools and like maternity wards and things like that. And there could be, if we don't have the birth rate to provide a working population, we might actually have an increase in robots doing the jobs that people used to be able to do. Okay, and finally for migration, one of the key things is you must name your case study, and every single past paper question that we have allows you to choose. So I'm not saying only focus on one case study, but they generally always say for a migration you have studied, so you can pick. So you would do either Poland to the UK or Syria to Europe. Now they talk about in the question, give reasons for this migration, and that's the push-pull factors. Now, generally, these are quite straightforward, but the key kind of thing I wanted to point out to you is that they want specific reasons, so like hard facts and hard numbers. So the wee example I've put there is for Poland to the UK. The GDP in Poland was 12,700 per head compared to the UK's, which is obviously 30,900, so it's much higher. So if you move to Poland, you're more likely to have a job that pays better, to give you a better standard of living and things like that. They like that more than they move to get jobs. They like it to be a lot more detailed. So for Syria, you can obviously talk about the impact of the civil war and the fact that President Assad wasn't helping people enough, and the civil war broke out. They like real specifics for that one. And then finally, your other migration question would be impacts on either donor or receiving. Now, sometimes they ask both, sometimes they ask one or the other. So the key thing is be careful as to whether it's the donor, and that's the country that the migrant is leaving, so they're moving from. So that'll be either Poland or Syria. So it's the impact on them, like the loss of generally the active population and the workers. If it's Poland or for Syria, it's generally a loss of the women and children because they've moved to stay safe, and the males are left at home to fight. It's all these sorts of things. You get a brain drain left in the country. Whereas the receiving is the country that the migrant is moving to, so is receiving that person, so i.e. Scotland or Europe. So that would be either the benefits or the challenges that brings to the receiving country. Okay. Hi folks, in this session I just want to go over some skills and hints and tips for your mapping skills question. So first of all, it's always question 5, although might not be in your FAB because it's slightly numbered slightly different, but in the final exam it will be question 5. There is always part A and part B, but they are the same. the challenge is that you need to set the scene. So there's always something different that they're going to build. So for example, in 2023, it was a new housing development. In 2022, it was a new Eden project in Morecambe. So what you need to be very careful about is that you read the paragraph which sets the scene. It's always in a little text box at the top. Then part A always wants you to talk about the suitability or the advantages and disadvantages, which is just the same, of the proposed site or location. So sometimes they word it slightly differently, but they basically want you to go through what's good and what's bad about where they're going to build it. And they've already decided it is a real thing, it's not something they've made up. And then part B are the possible social, economic and environmental impacts this development may have on the surrounding area. And that is advantages and disadvantages, good and bad for the impacts as well. Now, both A and B are out of 20 altogether. So in theory, you can answer A and B together, or you can do it separately. I find separately is easier. Certainly for me, and my hints and tips will have it separate, but that's not to say you have to do it separately. You have to do A and B, and you physically can't do just one and get full marks. But you need to have A and B, and the 20 marks are fluid throughout. Now, for part A, first of all, the key tips for this advantages, disadvantages, good, bad of why the area that they've picked. Now, the key thing is there are 4 marks out of the 20 that are available for map evidence. Now, these are silly marks to throw away. You have to make sure you are definitely getting these 4 marks. Now, for the map evidence, there's a few different ways you can get it. You can either give grid references. Now, we are at higher level, so we're looking for 6-figure grid references. I'm not going to go through them here. If you're not sure, make sure you go and see your geography teacher and they will go through your 6-figure grid referencing with you. Second of all, you can use road numbers. So on every single map, the road numbers are written next to the map. So the M8 or the A623 or something like that. You can also use heights. So you could talk about the land, so using the contours, so you can say it's flat or it's low or any of that sorts of things, and you could give a number, so 10 metres. And then finally, you could use place names as well. I tend to encourage people to use this if they're talking about a small town nearby, say Wensleydale or something like that. They can pop that information there. Okay, now, like I say, it's 4 marks. You do not want to lose it. Grid references are the most common way. So I always say to people, just everything you write, the site is good because of this, or this is a good thing, or this is an advantage, because there is. Always just give a grid reference to back it up. Okay. Now, what I always try and do is try and get people to go through a kind of list of things that they want to think about. Now, it's obviously a challenge because you get a different scenario every time from what they're building, but we created with my class last year an acronym to try and help think about the different things that they're looking for. So the acronym it goes for LUDWAC, okay, so it's not a word, but we made it up, and here we've got each of the different parts. So the first thing you want to think about is the land, and is it flat land? Now, because it's a real development, it will be flat land, and flat land is actually a great way to get 3 marks, and I'll show you on the next slide how you do that. Then the second one, you want to think of the uses of the land. In particular, the last 2 years, so 2022 and 2023, they have given you land which has been used before. So for Morecambe, it used to be like a theatre or a swimming pool or something before. And for the housing estate this year, it was a disused airfield. Now, these are really good because the land's already level, the land's already flat. It's already got levels of electricity, plumbing, sewage, all these sorts of things. So that's a good thing that you can talk about. However, you could also say it's a negative thing because there might be some clearing up of anything left behind that needs to be done, or it might not be the right shape or the right size. So it's actually a really, really, really good thing. Obviously, if the land has not been used, again, that's a great thing because you can just start from scratch and you can do whatever you want. The D is for drainage. So are there rivers nearby? Is the land marshy? What's the suitability of the site? You know, if you've got marshland, you're going to need to put in more investment and more cost to make sure that the area is stable. If there's a river nearby, are you going to have to check and make sure that it doesn't flood? It's these kind of things. Workers I think are a really good one. You're always going to need construction workers. So where are your workers going to come from during construction? Is there a little town or a village nearby? Great, name it, get your map evidence mark. But also, are you building something that's got long-term workers? Okay, so is it like the Eden Project, or is it a hotel and leisure centre? You're going to need people to work all year round. If it's a retail park or hotel and leisure centre, these things are brilliant. Where's your nearby school? Because you can get kids, you don't know if it's a high school, but you can make that assumption. High school, the teenagers can work at it in the evenings and weekends. It's a great way to look at it. Accessibility, so how are your people getting there? So there's your roads, there's your railways, that's where you can bring in your road numbers. Again, think about construction. Is it a main road? Is it a motorway? Well, that's going to be great for your construction vehicles because they're bigger, they're heavier, they need large roads to get there. Whereas then you might say, but my customers, my people that are going to use the site or going to work there, could also come via this railway. Okay, you don't want to constantly talk about roads because it's repeat marks, but if you can do some roads, some railways, maybe it's located by the beach, you might get tourists on the way past, all these kind of things. And then finally, I call it customers, but where are the people coming from that are going to use what you're building? So if it's your housing estate, where are your people that are going to buy the houses coming from? Where are your hotel, customers coming from? Where are your tourists coming from? So again, it depends on the area, but if it was, say for example, a tourist facility, where are your nearby campsites? Here, that's where your tourists are going to come from. Okay, all these sorts of things you want to have a wee think about. Now here's a wee example sentence, and in particular the flatland one. Flatland should be your first sentence. Okay, we are very lucky still. I don't know if they're going to change their mind at some point, but they literally give 1 mark for saying this site is suitable because there is flatland. Then there's your grid reference. That gives your map evidence mark. That's what the ME stands for. And then providing you say something along the lines of, this is good as it's easy to build on, keeps construction costs low, you're going to get a 3rd mark. Okay, so it's really, really, really important. Okay, but like I say, flatland is an amazing one for getting 3 marks. And you'll see that map evidence mark there. As long as you do 4 of them, you're going to bank your 4 map evidence marks, which is a great way to start because it's almost 25% of your marks for that one there. Okay, now for part B, social, economic and environmental impacts. Like I say, it can be positive or negative on the area. Again, it's tricky because it depends on what you're building and it's a skills question. But social, I always think jobs. People in the area are going to get jobs. Then if people get jobs, they have more money. Then people's mental health is generally happier. They can then spend that in the local area. However, you're going to have traffic congestion during construction. That can be a negative thing. People can be late for their work, all these sorts of things. But also, another positive, increased facilities for people to use. Is it something there that locals can use? They're going to be happy with that. Economic, think the money. People have got jobs, they spend it in local shops. The local shops then benefit, they get more money. They get the multiplier effect then, the government gets more money, the local authorities then get more money. They then spend it back in the area, benefiting the area greatly. Environmental, generally negative, but is there something being destroyed? Again, there might not be, but are you destroying animal habitats? Are you getting rid of forestry areas? Are you getting rid of farmland? The impact that that's going to have. Obviously, the impact of more traffic, more construction. You can link it to your greenhouse gases. You can link it to your climate emergency. You can also think of conflicts that might occur. So if it's a tourist site, you're then encouraging more tourists and how the locals might not get on with tourists. All these sorts of things can be thought about. Now, and there we go, that's the wee thing I talked about there with your conflicts. Now, the one thing is that as well as using the map, there are always extra bits of information given the question paper. So for example, graphs and for example, tables. You can also get 2 marks available for using these. You need to do something with them, but you can get marks for using these. So for example, it might show the tourist numbers. And if you can see tourist numbers will increase when this opens, because in 1990 there were 3,000, whereas in 2026 they're going to be 6,000, then you would get a mark for doing that. Or it might be population increase. Again, it will increase So there's people that need the houses, that will buy the houses. It was this number previously, it now is that number. Or it could be traffic flow, when we're talking about congestion there. Increased traffic during construction is going to cause problems for the local people. You can give the numbers before build and after build. So these are really, really, really good things to also pick up your extra marks. Okay, here's a wee example sentence linked to that. So traffic will increase in the area as seen in graph whatever the number is, with the number of vehicles before construction was 600 and after it increased to 1,000. You'd get a mark for that. That's for using the other sources, not just the map. And that's on top of your map evidence marks. This will result in greater journey times for local people getting to work and shopping, and our remark there, possibly increasing incidents of road rage, our mark. This will also increase carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide emissions, that should say adding to the greenhouse effect and the climate emergency. Okay, now the key thing about the mapping question that is skills based, it's your best to practice and to bring them in to get marks. But my kind of key things to remember is read the information you get at least twice in the paragraph and the different graphs and the sources. Always give your 4 bits of map evidence. Always use the other sources because there's another 2 marks available for them. And I try and say to people, put yourself in that developer's shoes. Imagine you are building it. What are you going to need of the piece of land? And then also imagine you were living there and what is the impact that that's going to have on you. Bit of extra help, obviously you have your teachers that you can go to, and you've got all your class notes and model answers and folding frenzies. But a reminder for Let's Achieve, which you are all on or all should be on, and you can get access to all the revision materials and the help there. We also have our Larbert High School Geography website, and the links to both of these are on here as well, and will be on your Google Classrooms.